Hi, welcome to the bathtub, where when you hear this new sound effect, which is supposed to be free that I found on the internet, that's a horrible sound effect. You know it's time for a brand new theme show. We have a brand new theme show here at the bathtub because people constantly ask me for more theme shows. I have so many theme shows I forget how many theme shows we do have. So in order to not have to go back and remember what those theme shows were, I invent new ones, and then I don't have to remember the other ones I used to do. This one's the percolating is a clever reference to our a new theme show. It's going to be called "Would You Like Us to Freshen That Up for You, Hun?" That's my impression of a waitress. Would you like us to freshen that up for you, hun? And we're going to actually just kind of touch base on books that we used to do. And this one is going to be Shirley Jackson, who received the All-Bathtub Hall of Fame a couple years ago, as you remember, in a really exciting episode of the show, which was rebroadcast, I'm sure, all over the interweb. And the great A.A. Fair, who was actually the pseudonym of the great Erle Stanley Gardner. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Anyway, these are very short catch-up episodes to remember the wonderful stuff that these people wrote. And of course, as usual, I haven't prepared what I should prepare here. If you would like, there's Dodo. I'm doing these together. In the last episode, if you're following these as a serial, which you should, there's Dodo still up there. She doesn't want to come down, but she's still there, and I'm still drinking the same Manhattan. I'm wearing the same shirt. And we're going to do a very quick one here. So, we're going to talk about Shirley Jackson, one of my favorite bathtub reads. Shirley Jackson was a wonderful novel, and particularly a great short story writer. So, Shirley Jackson there's a new book out, which I'm going to put the link below to the piece I just did for the Los Angeles Times. It's called The Letters of Shirley Jackson. Okay, it's a big, fat sucker, 600 pages, fairly densely set out, and it's just a selection of the woman wrote voluminous letters to friends and family. It's not like a lot of books of letters where you're just kind of hearing people talk about how much money they need, and like F. Scott Fitzgerald was constantly asking for advances. This is just kind of stories she would tell her. She would write these kind of silly stories about her and her family and the crazy adventures and going to the post office. And there's not a boring page in this book. It's the most fun book of letters I think I've ever read. It's also filled with cartoons. She used to write little cartoons and include them in the letters she would send to people. And you would just think that if you received a letter from Shirley Jackson, A, you'd be delighted, and B, you might feel inundated because she must have written a lot of these letters. This one is Shirley Jackson. Was basically her husband went to the office and was an academic, and she stayed home, took care of, I guess, 4 kids. I can't remember now. 4 kids and their friends, and cleaned and cooked in these big ramshackle houses that they used to keep out in Vermont and upstate New York. And the husband would come home, and this is the joke: is one thing you gotta have, dear, is exercise. So rock me a little, will you? And that's the husband reading his newspaper, and she's like exhausted. That's Shirley Jackson with the broom. He's asking her to rock her. So basically, he's treated like the sitcom father who never does anything. But they're actually pretty funny comics, and the whole book is fun. It's great fun. She wrote the son. It's edited by her son Laurence Jackson, and one of the things he says in there, which is worth remembering, Shirley Jackson should have, when she died very young in her late 40s, she should have been remembered as one of the great short story writers. She was just hilarious. You think Flannery O'Connor was good. I think Shirley Jackson was actually a better she did even more stories, more hilarious stories. And she was just really strange stories, the strangest stories you can think of. So her son mentions that she wrote 2 memoirs of kind of family, raising kids. One's called Raising Demons. Life with Savages is another one. So she wrote these 2 best-selling books. They were the most successful books she wrote. She also wrote Haunting of Hill House, as we've talked about, and We Have Always Lived in the Castle, which were also successful. But her big successes were these memoirs of being a mother, an exhausted mother. And as a result, I think it kind of, she wasn't taken as seriously as she should have been. Even those books were actually really well written, very funny. I went back. I wanted to talk about her again. I was rereading some of these stories. And I just want to tell one story I was reading that just knocked me out. Reading it again. All these stories are great. Most of them are pretty strange. And they have always a little twist that's not a horrific twist or a horror twist, so there's no monsters coming out of those closets. But there's kind of psychological ideas that only Jackson would come up with. And the one that knocked me out the most was the story called The Dummy. It's about 3 or 4 pages. It's about a couple of boring middle-class women going out, a couple of middle-class parents, women going out to meet and have for dinner. And they go to some restaurant where there's a man, a ventriloquist, and he's doing a boring ventriloquist act. And during dinner, they look over, and the ventriloquist is taking his dummy to this table where he's sitting with a pretty woman. And the dummy is conducting a conversation. The ventriloquist it's one of those stories where the dummy is kind of taken over the relationship, and the dummy is talking and telling everybody off and criticizing everybody and complaining about. It's a real little bastard. It's a real mean little dummy. And at one point, and it's this woman who's in a relationship clearly with them, and he's really mean to her. The dummy's nasty to her, and the man is just kind of glazed over and doesn't know what's going on. And it's clearly he's a bit nuts. At one point, I can't remember if the man he just beats. They get so angry, he knocks the dummy down, and he throws it on the table, and the dummy's lying on the table, motionless, not saying anything. Now, up to that, it's a weird story, but there's a little touch at the end. I just got to describe it. The girlfriend looks at the dummy and sees it kind of lying like this, and she adjusts it so it'll be comfortable. It's the weirdest. It's the most perfect ending to a short story I remember. It said still stays with me. This woman has this affection for this nasty little dummy. It wasn't, again, it wasn't some, the dummy comes out of the closet with a knife. It's that affection she feels for it. Wonderful story. There's also one of the best stories about racism in the suburbs I've ever read. Flower Garden, which is a brilliant story, and about the way people pretend to be nice and they're actually kind of bastards. Shirley Jackson had a very cynical vision of people. So anyway, that's just touching base with Shirley Jackson again. I'll put a link to that piece when I run it. The other book I read about 3 or 4 years ago, I did a piece about A.A. Fair. A.A. Fair, this one's called Some Slips Don't Show. Erle Stanley Gardner, you all should know, he wrote all the Perry Mason novels. The Perry Mason novels, I'll reiterate really quickly, are 10 times better than the old TV show, which is fun. But the books are a lot better. And because he wrote so many of those books, he created the pseudonym of A.A. Fair, so he could write another series about the Bertha Cool and Donna Lamb, who run a detective agency in California. And I haven't read one. I read a whole bunch of them 3 years ago when I wrote this piece for the Los Angeles Review of Books, which I'll also link below. But just for fun, we got our friend Gary Swafford out there, Gary of 1,000 Books. I wanted to mention his birthday. We missed his birthday a while back. But he's a big fan of Erle Stanley Gardner, and it kind of made me remember I wanted to go back and read one. So I picked this up secondhand somewhere recently, and I hadn't read him in a long time. I kind of got fed up. I read so many in a short period of time. And this is from 1957. So it's really midway in the series, and it's a hoot. It's just a lot. All these are much better than any. I much prefer these to the Perry Mason books. And again, remember is that the boss is Bertha Cool. She runs the agency, and she's kind of a little overweight, and she's really loudmouthed, and she's kind of rude, and all she cares about is making money. And Donna Lamb is kind of her leg man, kind of like Archie in the Nero Wolfe books. He's always going off and doing all the work, and he's also a total con man. So he's not like Perry Mason, maybe manipulative, but Donald Lamb, he's very short. He's like an Alan Ladd character. He's short and super handsome, and the women love him. And he goes off to investigate a murder. The old story. He investigates a character, and then a murder gets committed along the way, and he meets a lot of women who want to go to bed with him. But every time he gets involved in a murder, he just starts lying to everybody. He's always lying and finding a way to control everybody around him. And they're kind of keeping up with all the lies. And the books are very short, which is another thing I think is important about a good murder mystery thriller. It's only 100. You read this thing, you can read it in about 3 or 4 hours, and it should be, because you'll forget all the characters. But Some Slips Don't Show was really one of the really good ones. Make you laugh. Some of the scenes are very funny. And I just want to remind everybody that A Fair is good. and I didn't want to do a whole episode since we've done them before, but we'll just do these every once in a while. So the name of these theme shows are can we freshen that up for you, hun? And I'm not going to do that theme song, that music, the sound effect I did sounded kind of like somebody's stomach. It sounded like my stomach, actually, but it wasn't. It was a very, very, very well-crafted sound effect that was free. Okay, happy bathing, and I'm going to do one more of these before I close up shop because I'm so far behind.